Okay, so let's start today. Today we will do graph streaming and sketching as promised last time. And for next 4 lectures, we will stick to graphs and then we will do lower bounds. Okay, before moving to dimension reduction and other things. If you recall, I have sent you the list of topics which we were covering and whatever we have covered. So that is what we are trying to follow basically. So all of you know what graphs are. So I'm not going to define what graphs are. So we will have graphs will have a vertex set and edge set is an undirected graph where n will denote number of vertices and m will denote number of edges. And edges E1 to EM will be seen as stream. Sometimes n will be known and sometimes n will be unknown. Okay, but all the algorithms which we will do today, it doesn't matter whether n is known or n is unknown. Okay, so edges will be coming into the stream. So this is the setting in which we will be working. Okay, and what is our objective? Our objective will be, as we say in a streaming algorithm, we would like to keep something such that at the end we would like to answer some question. Okay, so we will see some, right? We would like to keep some small, say, information about graph, which we have seen, information about graph. Okay, and right. So suppose what we have kept information is H, and the graph we have is G. At the end, using H, we would like to answer something about G. Okay, so that is the whole idea. Okay, and where it is useful, because there are lots of graphs which are so big that you cannot see them. For example, social networks, web graphs, call graphs, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so these are so graph streaming is very well motivated from this perspective. Okay, so the two fundamental questions which people ask is that what graph problems can be solved with small space, and can we handle edge deletions? Meaning, I will say, okay, edge 1. So I will have edge 1 add, edge 3 delete, right? So this is like a turnstile model. So think of this, that I have this n vertex graph, okay, and this graph is evolving in some sense. This graph is dynamic in some sense. Like sometimes some edge is added, sometimes some edge is deleted, and at the end, whatever is left is what my G is. Okay, at the end of the stream, and we would like to store H and answer about some questions about G, even when both edges are added as well as deleted in the stream. Okay, so we will see this, but today what we will do, so is the questions clear, the kind of questions we will be addressing? Okay, yes, was there any question? Okay, so lower bound shows that for most natural problem, you need omega n memory space. Okay, in fact, for many problem, we will see that actually you need omega n log n memory. Okay, so in the beginning, when people introduced this graph streaming model, okay, people so notice why I'm talking about. So now I'm going to talk about something called semi-streaming model. So in streaming model, if you recall, up until now, the only space we were allowed was like poly log n and some epsilon, delta, but the space was just poly log n. But now that we are faced with these kind of lower bounds for most graph problems, that you need omega n memory bits, in fact, omega n log n bits, then it's natural that we relax this condition, which was very good for numerical problems like this poly log n space requirement was a very good assumption, but this is not a good assumption if we want to get anything non-trivial algorithms. So people came up with this, what can we compute about G if we have little O of M space? Forget about, like, even if I tell you that you're not allowed to store all the edges, can you still solve something interesting, right? And then this led to people asking the following question: assume we have n polylog in memory, like about polylog per vertex of the graph, okay? And then focus on semi-streaming, where space restriction is that the amount of space you can take is order polylog in width, right? But in general, people do all kind of questions. All that you want to do is that you do not want to store the whole graph, right? And you still want to answer several questions, right? So one thing is like semi-streaming model, where the total number of allowed space will be n log n to the power order 1. Okay, so this is what is called semi-streaming model. Okay, at least I'm giving you polylog n space per vertex. Okay, but people also study like, okay, fine. What about n to the power 3 by 2 or order n to the power 4 by 3? I mean, anything which is better than storing all the edges. Okay. Okay. But classically, if you use the word semi-streaming, then you have to use the word, and you are only allowed to take n polylog n bits. Any of this, you have to say subquadratic space, blah, 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 blah. But semi-streaming always means in graph algorithm that you are allowed to use n polylog n bits. Okay. And this allows us to get over all these kind of lower bounds, and we can create some new and interesting algorithms. So what is this problem? Essentially, if you notice, it's about reducing dense graphs to sparse graphs, right? Because if that is what amount, because I'm not assuming that my input is going to be, input is going to be sparse or something. If all I'm going to assume is that any graph can come, but amount of space I'm going to allow is like n polylog n. So in my opinion, like at least the way I view it, I view this as a kernel, okay, with slightly different notion, okay. Okay. Now you can ask following question. Then will people not study streaming model, say for spatial graph classes, like say planar graph, okay, where I know that the number of edges is like 3n minus 6, right? And then I can store all the edges. Yes, when you do that, then you do not, then in these settings, you do not store everything. Then you go back to polylog n world, okay? And you ask for things like estimate, okay? So for example, what is a maximum matching size, right? Like, what is an estimate of maximum matching size? What is an estimate of minimum vertex cover? Because this is the object which I can store in polylog n bits, right? I cannot store whole matching, because in planar graph also I could have a matching of size n by 2, right? So the moment you start to get into a sparse graphs and you like to, like you are going to make an assumption that my input is going to come as a sparse graph, either you introduce some parameters and you want to store objects with respect to that parameter, or you try to estimate an object. But we will not get into these kind of things, okay? All we will try to do is coming up with a kernel for a problem with n polylog n bits, okay? So this is a whole, so this is a perspective which I generally take about these problems, is that given a graph, can I come up with an n polylog n bit kernel, okay? Okay, so with that in mind, okay, there are two models we will study. As I said, there's something called edge insertion model, where only edges are added, nothing is deleted. Like every edge is coming one by one, and second is turnstile model or dynamic model, where edges are added as well as deleted. So you could have both operations, okay? And so these are the two main models which people study. And there is another model which slightly people study, which we will come in a minute, okay? Towards when we will be doing some examples, okay? So today we will only do insertion only, okay? So for today's lecture, streams are like edges are coming, nothing is being deleted, okay? Okay, and we would like to solve some problem. Okay. So the first problem which I would like to solve is connectivity, like very basic problem. And So my question which I want to answer is like, is G connected? And if it is connected, output a spanning tree if it has, okay? And when we have weights, okay, I would like to output a minimum weight spanning tree, so MST of G, okay? So they are the kind of questions which I'm interested in. Okay, so basic connectivity goal is compute the number of connected components, okay? So what do you think algorithm should be? Look, we are only in edge insertion model. Everybody, all of you know this algorithm.
So unweighted or weighted?
Unweighted.
Yeah, then initially there are n components. Whenever each comes, if fit between two components, add them. Otherwise, we just ignore them.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So that's the algorithm. So you maintain a spanning forest F. In the beginning, F is phi. For each edge E equal to UV, if U and V are in different components in F, then you add to that, else discard E. Okay. And what is the analysis? So what are we doing? We are maintaining a spanning forest F. F has the same number of connected components as G, and how many edges F has? At most n minus 1 edges. Okay, excellent. So what we have proved, we can count connected components in order n log n space, because you are only storing the n minus 1 edges, and to store each edge, you have to store per vertex, like 2 vertex per edge. So this is like an order log n bits. Okay, so in order n log n bits, clearly we can answer connectivity in edge insertion model. And you will be surprised to know that this is also a lower bound. Okay? Okay, and we will prove some of these lower bounds. I will not show n log n lower bound, but I'll say at least omega 1 lower bound, I'll prove. Okay? Okay, very nice. Basic connectivity is easy. Anybody has an issue? Okay, let's see how. Now I want to graphs has weights. Okay. Say weights are distinct, just to make life easy, nothing more than that. Okay. And I want to compute minimum weight spanning tree. What will I do now? What algorithms do we know?
So include the edge. If it introduces a cycle, delete the maximum weightage from the cycle. Otherwise, add.
Yes. Okay. Okay. There's one algorithm which I know. How many of you know Kruskal's algorithm? Anybody else but Aritra? So what we do in that is that we sort the edge with weights, and you try to sort. So suppose this is like E1, E2, E3 in terms of weights, EM. And now you basically go from left to right, and you just add, so you maintain forest. So this is like whatever we did for connectivity, okay? Connectivity, you just do that. But if you notice, we cannot implement this algorithm in streaming, because we don't have all these edges upfront, and since we do not have these edges upfront, I cannot sort them and do these things. So our basic algorithm of Kruskal's at least doesn't work. Okay, and Prim, if you notice, what does Prim do? Prim actually starts from a vertex, and at any point of time, right, it has looks at all the edges which are crossing and picks the one with the minimum weight, right? This is what it does. Now, this also doesn't look very easy to implement. So now Aritra told us that let's do the following, is that for each edge UV, if U and V are in different components in F, then I say that you add F union UV. Like, there's no issue with it. But next, else check cycle form by adding E and discard heaviest edge in cycle from F. Okay. Now this we can do because we have F, and we have F, and we add an edge. We add an edge UV. Okay, and if this is an heaviest edge on this cycle, then you discard this edge. Else you discard some other edge which is heaviest on the cycle. Okay. Now, so we are still maintaining a spanning forest F. F has at most n-1 edges. Okay, and it is supposed to be exercised, but let's see. Why does this algorithm produces and outputs an MST if G is connected? Okay, how do we go about proving that this does produce MST if G is connected? Anybody? Right? Because if we prove this, then we are done. So we did not focus on time to process each edge in stream, but we can use data structures to implement this in order log n time per operation. But anyway, since I do not care about running time, all I care about space, is we can output MST in order n log n space. Okay. But now my question is, okay, why is this algorithm correct? Right? Most of you have seen minimum weight spanning trees algorithm, and so why is this algorithm correct? Anybody?
Well, we have to prove it, right? So
yes, yes.
So optimal tree, we have the tree outputted by the algorithm, and then we have to argue that, we have to take the optimal tree, which is different from this one, the least, and then we have to argue that we can construct a better tree.
Yes.
I don't know. It sounds, at least it sounds very similar to the proof of the Kruskal algorithm correctness.
Exactly. So yeah, so this is not very hard or something, right? As Federer said, that you start with, say, my F, and suppose T is an optimum spanning tree, optimum min weight spanning tree, right? Right. Now, we will, since let's assume that all the weights are distinct, we need to show that we will, for a contradiction, we will show that, oh, well, weight of T, we can get another T prime such that weight of T prime is less than or equal to weight of T, contradicting that T is a MST. Okay. And so you ask yourself, so look, F and T are not same, implies there exists E in T minus F. Okay. Now, but look, E is not in F. It means E was discarded. E was discarded. What is the meaning of E was discarded? Well, when you were considering this, okay, this edge, right? What was the property? For all these edges UV on this path, this edge was heaviest, right? Weight of E was most among all these edges. That is why. Or in other words, for all E prime on this path, UV path, what we know, weight of E prime is less than or equal to weight of E. Which means, okay, now I want to show that, well, start with T. Okay, and from T, let's delete this edge E. Okay, when I delete this T edge, you will get two components. One contains U, other contains V, right? And clearly, because it is a cycle, there exists some edge here which is not in T. So let's look at this path U to V. Okay, I know that this path will go from here, maybe here, and pick any edge on this path which is not in T. Okay, and just add that. Okay, now you have got another T prime. Okay, and what is the property? Weight of T prime is less than or equal to weight of T. Why? Because what you have done is added T minus E plus E prime, where E prime is an edge on this path, right? So although we have not used the algorithm of minimum weight spanning tree, okay, but we are using the same property as is known for the minimum weight spanning tree, right? So we just use the proof rather than the algorithm itself. Like we implemented the proof rather than the algorithm. So at sometimes you will have to look into the proof, look at the properties, and design a new minimum weight spanning tree algorithm or new algorithm which does the job for you. Okay, so this is how you can show that minimum weight spanning tree can be done in order n log in space. Well, you also have to we assume that the weights are like polynomial or something. Otherwise, let m be the maximum weight, and there will be a log m factored for that. Okay. Now I want to do k-edge connectivity. Okay. A graph G is k-edge connected if deleting any k minus 1 edges still leaves a connected graph. Okay. So what is the graph when a graph G is k-edge connected if deleting any k minus 1 edges leaves a graph connected graph. Okay. And let's given a graph GVE and S subset of V, delta S is a set of edges with exactly one endpoint in S. Okay. So this is a very well-known fact. A graph G is k-edge connected if and only if delta of S is greater than or equal to k for all S subset of V, like proper subset of V. Why? Well, suppose graph is k-edge connected. Look at any S. And look at any V minus S. Okay. It should, if it has strictly less than k edges, then you can delete all strictly less than k edges, and you have got two components by what do you call? Right? By deleting at most k minus 1 edges, I have made the graph disconnected. So this part is obvious. Now, if delta S is greater than or equal to k for all S subset of V, why graph G is k-edge connected? Well, suppose graph G is not k-edge connected. What is the meaning of this? There exists some set S, okay? There exists, if you delete some k minus 1 edges, okay? Then you get several component, say at least two component. Pick up any vertex S here, pick up any component here, pick up any component after deleting. How many edges can it have? It has many components, but look at any component here. Let's call that S, and let's call rest of the component as V minus S, right? It has at most k minus 1 edges, but that contradicts that delta of S is greater than or equal to k for all S, which is a proper subset of V, right? So graph being k-edge connected is completely characterized by the fact that how many edges are emanating out of per every vertex subset. Okay, so if G is k-edge connected, then why M is at least kn by 2? Anybody?
Well, you use the last result for every vertex cut.
Okay.
So you have the degree.
Exactly. So so what does it imply is that this implies that for all V, degree of V is at least k, right? Because the last result was true for every S subset of V. So the because of that, now I apply that to a particular vertex, which implies that m is at least kn by 2. Great. But what we can also show that suppose G is edge minimal k-edge connected graph. What I mean by edge minimal k-edge connected graph? Well, G is edge minimal k-edge connected graph if you delete from G any edge, okay, then G is not k-edge connected. Okay? Okay. Now, this is a theorem which will prove that any edge minimal k-edge connected graph on n nodes has at most k into n minus 1 edges. Okay? Okay. And so look, here's a lower bound, right? Any k-edge connected graph. So what does it tells us? That look at any edge minimal k-edge connected graph, right? We have a lower bound of kn over 2, and we have an upper bound of k into n minus 1, right? And however, if you want to find the smallest two-edge connected subgraph, then this problem is NP hard, because what is the smallest two-edge connected subgraph? Anybody? Which is the smallest two-edge connected subgraph?
Hamiltonian cycle.
Exactly. So Hamiltonian cycle. So we can give reduction from Hamiltonian cycle, right? But look, but if we can find an edge minimal k-edge connected graph, like two-edge connected graph with at most 2 into n minus 1 edges, then what is this? This will give us a factor 2 approximation, obviously. Right? Because we need at least n minus 1 edges because of the connectivity, and it's two-edge connectivity, and that's a minimum size is at least n, and at most 2n edges we are going to use. So it's like factor 2 approximation, and there are a lot of work has been done to get it down below factor 2 approximation. Okay, so that is that. Okay, and here is a constructive proof by algorithm. I'm not going to prove this. We'll prove something slightly differently in a minute. Okay, so here's my SPART certificate for k-edge connectivity. Okay, so what is this? Let Fi be a spanning forest. So I find a spanning forest of my graph, delete that edge, pick another one, delete that, pick another one, delete that. Okay, my claim is that this H, which we have constructed this here, is, for now, let's believe that this is, suppose we prove the following thing. Okay, so it's easy to see that it has at most k into n minus 1 edges. Okay, now suppose I'm able to show to you that G is k-edge connected if and only if H is. Okay, okay, so you start with any graph. Okay, right, you start with any graph G. Okay, and what I do, this is my proof, right? I start with any graph and I can get an H by doing this process, which has at most kn minus 1 edges, which also implies that any minimal k-edge connected graph will have at most k into n minus 1 edges. But I will prove this later, but first I want to ask, how will we implement this algorithm in streaming? Do you understand the question? So here is my algorithm. I will prove to you that whatever this will generate is a k-edge connected subgraph. But my question is, how am I going to implement this in the streaming setting?
Well, you can construct forests, well, spanning forests in parallel.
Okay. What do
you use, say, colors?
So how will you do that in parallel?
No, well, I don't know. Well, so this, well,
so edges are coming E1, E2, what will you do?
Well, we insert edge if we need and color it somehow.
Okay.
Well, if we have another edge that joins components with distinct colors,
Okay.
then we add it and so on.
Okay. So let's try to make this algorithm. Okay. So our goal is to check if all cuts are of size at least k or not. Okay. So we are going to maintain k forest, f1 to fk, and f1 to fk is empty set. Okay. In the beginning. Now what I do for each edge uv, I find the smallest index I less than equal to k, and this is I is like a color, such that u and v aren't connected in fi. Okay. And then I do fi union uv. And if no such I exists, I ignore this edge. Okay. So this is what, in some sense, I'm trying to do this in parallel, right? So I have k forest, right? So basically, a new edge comes, I say, hey, look at the first index. Are you going to make this edge like this? Are you going to maintain this forest? Are you going to maintain this forest? Are you going to maintain this forest? If it is, so look at the first index for which you're going to maintain the forest. I added there. And why do I not add anything else? Well, I do not add anything else because, okay, why do I not add any edge? Because in every where I try to add him, it creates cycle. It creates cycle. It creates cycle. Okay, so this is why then I take this edge and throw this out. Okay. Okay. So this is clear that each fi has at most n minus 1 edges. So in total of order nk edges. Okay. Now what is not clear, I'm going to prove this, that min cut of GVE is less than equal to k if and only if min cut of V f1 to fk is strictly less than k. I'll prove this in a minute. Okay. But suppose I prove this, then we can check kh connectivity in order kn log n space. Okay. So what is left for us is to prove why min cut of this is less than equal to this. Okay. So now let's prove this. Look at, okay. So what is, suppose this is less than k, it means there is just a partition f and v minus s here, which has at most k minus 1 edges. Right? Now, if I go and look at this same partition in H, right? Suppose this is H, right? Same partition S and V minus S, okay? These red edges may become less. Why? Because H is a subgraph of G, right? So if I can delete at most k minus 1 edges and disconnect S, disconnect G, then so can I do here. So forward direction is very simple, okay? Because H is a sub. What is not obvious is a backward direction, okay? So now let's look at, here is my S and here is my V minus S, okay? This is my H, which is, recall H is this F1 union Fk. And what is the property? Suppose it has k minus 1 edges. Okay, suppose less than equal to k minus 1 edges. Okay, now when I look at the same cut, look at this cut in G. Okay, what happens when I go and look at this cut in G? So what could happen? I look at this cut, now I'm looking at in G. I could have red edges, of course, because H is a subgraph, but I could also have some other, say, purple edges, right? Purple edges, okay? Now let's fix one purple edge, U and V, okay? What did we do? We deleted UV, right? Because it is not in H. Why did we delete UV? look at the first guy. Okay. When I added UV, right? It was forming a cycle. Okay. It means I have a path P1 between U and V, which does not use edge UV in my forest F1. But the same thing I can say about P2 in F2, ... Fk and Pk. What is the property of P1 to Pk? P1, P2, Pk are edge disjoint paths between U and V. Am I right? Is this clear? This is because the way we have constructed F1 to Fk are edge disjoint paths, like they are edge disjoint. So the paths they have between U and V. Now look at P1 to Pk, right? There are K edge disjoint paths, right? But U is here and V is here. How can you disconnect U and V with K edge disjoint paths with at most K minus 1 edges, right? So this is a contradiction that what I started in S V minus S is K minus. So what is the moral of the story? What is H story? H has a following beautiful property. It preserves minimum of, say, for all UV, okay, say lambda G UV is the min cut, comma K. So it preserves for all UV these many edge disjoint paths. This is what it preserves, right? So, so look at any pair of vertex UV. If it has certain number of paths, right? I don't care whether like it has K plus 100 or not, but up to K paths, if it has edge disjoint paths, then I store them. Like I have a witness of that in my H, right? So if I'm looking for a threshold of connectivity up to K, then this construction is good enough, okay? Right? And this is a very beautiful and very useful construction, which is used time and again in different settings, okay? Any question on this? Okay. Okay. Now this is an okay. So this is a proof written. So I'm not going to go over it because I explained to you. But if you like to see here, it is written compactly. So this is what we proved. There's also a notion of k-node connectivity. And a graph GV is k-node connected or k-vertex connected if deleting any k-1 node leaves a connected graph. What do you think? Does k-node connectivity have a sparse certificate? Anybody? Any guess? Okay, so there's a theorem which says any edge minimal k edge connected graph on n nodes has at most kn edges. Okay, so slightly worse than edge because in edge we had kn minus 1, but now we have kn. But our theorem is much more tricky than for the edge case, and I am not aware of any implementation of this theorem which takes order kn polylog bits, even in edge streaming. But if I will have time, I will tell another algorithm which is randomized, and it maintains k node connectivity or k vertex connectivity in order kn polylog space. Okay. Okay. So
this theorem is for edge connected or node connected?
node connected.
Oh,
sorry.
the second theorem.
Oh, this is like any and okay. Okay, it should be node. Any node minimal k node connected. This is my bad. Okay, I'll change it. Okay, it should be node everywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a reference, like here you can find the proof for this. And this actually is based on some DFS orderings and this and that. So this is why it is not very easy to implement in the streaming setting. Okay, so you need a very different algorithm. Okay, so here's the reference you can find where they handle these things. Okay, so now I want to test whether graph is bipartite or not. Okay. Okay. So this is open to all of you. So we all know a graph G is bipartite if there exists a partition of vertex at V into A and B, so that all the edges have one endpoint in A and the other in B. In other words, G is two colorable. And we also know that a graph G is bipartite if and only if G does not have any odd cycle. I'm not going to prove this, please. But my question is, suppose I wanted to test bipartiteness in order n log n order 1. Okay, and this is deterministic. What is a sparse certificate for being bipartite? Anybody? I mean, this is a graph theory question. It has nothing to do with streaming algorithm, and this is open to all of you. William, have you seen, do you know any sparse certificate for being bipartite?
No. Wait.
So I will give you 10 to 20 seconds to think, because all of you are graph theorists. Okay, suppose I would say that reduce it to connectivity. This is my hint.
If I maintain maximum matching, is it going to help?
Maximum matching throw. I don't think so. You have to maintain. Look, I wrote a lemma. No, I'm on purpose waiting for a few minutes just for you to like think through your stuff, because maybe you will find it yourself. I think one
Construct coloring, and that's all.
Yeah, you can color it, but I mean, sounds strange.
Can we still keep a spanning tree?
Yes,
Last,
Yeah,
But this time we
Yeah.
can have a spanning tree which is two colored.
yes.
And then actually we just construct the spanning tree. And if there is an edge which goes to levels of different color,
But Feder, then you have to maintain BFS tree, not any spanning tree,
not good. Yeah.
right? And we will see in a minute that how hard is BFS. A spanning tree you can. So you have to reduce your computation to computing a spanning tree. This I agree. But not any specific spanning tree, because then in streaming or in any small space model, these things becomes very difficult. Because then you have to remember the names. Okay. So let me tell you this interesting, okay. So I saw this, like not saw this, I rediscovered this long time back when we were working on parity multi-way cut in 2010-11 or something, okay. But I have seen lately this graph so many times, okay. So this is called bipartite double cover of a graph GVE, okay. So what is this? For each V in V, DG has two nodes V1 and V2, okay. Now for each edge U equal to UV in E, DG has two edges, U1 V2 and U2 V1. So basically what it tells is that, look, for each V in V, I will have, say, this is a part of the reduction which you have seen it several times, right? Right? So for each V, you make two copies, like V1 copy and V2 copy, right? And similarly for U, you have two copy, U1, U2. Now, when you have an edge UV, you have this choice as well as this choice, and you make both choice, okay? So this is my one example, okay? So here is my graph Z, right? So for these two guys, I have a red and a white node, red and white node. And if there's an edge between these two, I give an edge between both copies of this, That's all, right? This is a graph which you have made several times in the reductions. Right? This is one very simple trick to make give reduction from, say, for example, dominating set in general graphs to dominating set in bipartite graphs. But there probably you also add edge between, matching between the similar vertices. Okay, so this is what I mean by double cover. Any question? Okay, so I want to check if the input graph is bipartite. So I'm going to do the following two things. I'm going to apply connectivity sketch to G and DG, which basically what I want to say that maintain a minimum spanning tree of G and get me a, not minimum spanning tree of G, because there's no weights here, okay? So spanning tree of G and a spanning tree of D of G. This is what my algorithm will be, okay? So first question is, do you think we can do this in streaming? Look, this is easy because this is same as you maintain a forest and do this. But D of G, so what we can do, so look, whenever, think of this that I have two nodes for every vertex, okay, right? And I'm trying to maintain a spanning tree on this. So whenever an edge comes, think that I have two edges, okay? And I just add one edge, add one of these edges if they are going to two different components. If they are not going to two different components, then or if both of them are going into two different components, then I add both edges. If one of them are going into one, then I add just one edge. If both of them are creating cycle, then I delete both edges. Is that clear? Right? So I can, on the fly also, given an edge of G, on the fly, I can also construct D of G, like a spanning tree of D of G, right? Is this clear? Right? So for example, what I mean is that, so suppose an edge UV came, okay? Now what will I do? I will check, okay, well, I have U1, V2, this is one, and other is U2, V1, right? So I will head my forest F, head the forest say F D of G. I check whether adding this edge creates what is that called? Creates a cycle, then I delete. If not, then I add this edge. Then I similarly do the same thing, okay? And that's it. So I can simulate this G and DG operations at the same time, okay? Is the algorithm clear? Okay. Now all I do is the following. I check if the number of connected components in DG is twice the number of connected components in G, then return bipartite. That's it. And look, this is deterministic. There is no randomization, nothing. I computed the connected component of G. I computed the connected component of D of G. If connected component of DG is 2 times connected component of G, say bipartite. Okay? That's it. So, and this we can do in polylog space. So for simplicity for analysis, let's assume that G is connected. Otherwise we can apply analysis on individual connected components. Okay? And we will show that D of G has two connected components if and only if G is bipartite. Right? Okay? So this is another testing of graph being bipartite. Right? But, right? So if I prove this, then I'm very happy because that gives me the correctness of the algorithm. And what I've shown, we can check whether graph is bipartite or not in order n log n space, right? So modulo this lemma, we know how to do bipartite testing in order n log n space, okay? Okay, so what about the proof? Anybody? Okay, so now let's, so look at the map D doubles the number of connected components. So notice here, just this is a bipartite graph. Do you agree? Right? And my claim is that it has two connected components. Is it true? Let's see. Yes, this is one connected component. This, and this is one connected component. So exactly two connected components. Now this is a connected graph, G prime, but it is not bipartite. And I'm going to show to you that this graph is actually connected. Like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, and like this. Yes, this is connected. You can check, right? So if it is bipartite, then the number of connected just doubled. But if it is not bipartite, number of connected components remains the same. Okay? Okay. Proof. Anybody?
Well, if it's like bipartite, you can start on like one vertex and show that, let's say, you will only contain points which have odd indices.
Yes. Okay. So rather than you were right, William. That's a good point. So let's say one thing, something very funky. Okay. So I want to say to you is that look at any odd cycle. Okay. And like this is the crux of the proof. Look at any odd cycle. Okay. Suppose this is an odd cycle. Okay. Suppose it contains a vertex U. Okay. My claim is that this guy maps to some U1, U2 path. Right? So this is a mapping, one-way mapping, that every odd cycle actually maps to some U1, U2 path. Right? Like, in fact, it will map to several U1. Like, if I would have picked up this guy, then it will map to that path. Why? Let's just do with two examples. Like, let's just do with triangles, just to understand. Okay? Now notice what happens. Here is my V1, like all the copies of first vertex and all the copies of the second vertex. Now notice when I go to the second part, I use only one edge. It means my path is odd, and by path I mean number of edges here. Okay, number of edges. Here it has odd number of edges, right? So suppose I went to U. Then which copy of, I don't know, I mean, like suppose I started with first copy of U1, then I can go to the second copy of 2. Then I can come here with the first copy of W1, but then look, I have only used, when I come back, I have used even. But now W to U is also W to U is an edge. But look, W1 and second copy of U, which is here, I have given an edge, right? So if you had, actually, if you notice, if you have any odd cycle, then I can create a path from U1 to U2. So any odd cycle actually maps to a path like this. Okay. And now, what about if there exists such a path in D of G, then I claim that your graph will have an odd component. If, let's try to show this. Okay. So what we saw, every odd cycle corresponds to a path, U1, U2 path for a particular vertex. Okay. I mean, this may not be very formal proof, but I'll show in a minute. Okay. But this gives you an idea. So like basically what has happened is that odd cycles have been mapped to a path of a specific kind. Now, what happens if I have, say, U1, U2 path in G, in D of G? Let's try to understand. So suppose if such a path exists, implies there exists U1 prime, U2 prime minimal path. What I mean by minimal path, look, what I mean is that I go, come back, like among them, there is no double vertex. Okay, there is no double vertex. Okay, notice that whenever you have a double vertex, I can look into the, so for example, what I mean by this, I start from U1 and I have a path U2. This is an odd length path. I go here and I encountered some W1. Then when I go from here, I encounter W2. Okay. Then this is also an odd path. So I take this one. Okay. I can keep doing this till I find some U1 prime, U2 prime, such that every other vertex appears like only once, at most once here. And this is an odd length path. Now, if you trace this path, it will correspond to an odd cycle. Why? Because I start with U1 prime. I go back to a new vertex, great. I go back to a new vertex, great. I go back to a new vertex, great, because all in. But when I come to the last guy, look, this W to U2 prime, they are the same vertex. So when I trace this path in my original graph, this will close and this will create an odd cycle for us, right? So what happens is that every odd cycle goes to such a path, and every path of certain kind maps to an odd cycle. So what you have done is that in some sense you have given some sort of bijective correspondence between odd cycles and a certain kinds of paths in G and D of G. Okay, and now a proof is, once this is done, proof is fairly simple. But this is a crux. So the proof is very fairly simple. So for the proof, I mean, this is a formal proof, okay? But the intuition is what I told you, okay? Suppose G is not bipartite. Right? Implies there exists an odd cycle in G. Okay. Suppose suppose there exists an odd cycle U. Now what happens? U. It means there exists a path from U1 to U2 in D of G. We just now saw. Now notice, since G is connected, since G is connected, what happens? Since G is connected, every vertex, every vertex in D of G is either connected to U1 or to U2, right? Because you get this path, right? You get this path because G is connected. So look at U, every one has a path to U. So now if I trace this path, I will either reach U1 or I will reach U2, correct? Now, so everybody here can reach either U1 or U2, and U1, U2 has a path in itself. So it implies D of G is connected, right? Okay. So if G is not bipartite, definitely D of G is connected. Okay. So it has only one component. Now, suppose Okay. So now what do you want to show to you is that suppose, right? So what we have shown, if G is not bipartite, then D of G has single component. Now I want to show that if D of G has single, if D of G had single component, then G is not bipartite, right? Then what will you do here? Well, then you will get this U1, U2 minimal path with internal vertices being used at most one, and from here get an odd cycle, as I explained before, right? So this is why this is an equivalent and a different characterization of bipartite graphs, which just reduces everything to checking basically number of connected components in an auxiliary graph, and we use that characterization to test whether a graph is bipartite or not. This is just formally written proof. So if you wish to check this out, check this. But the best way is, so similarly what happens is that in lots of places in parameterized algorithms, we make this double cover graph and we reduce hitting odd cycles to hitting paths of certain kind, right? And moment you do not have a, like basically what you want to kill in D of G, you want to kill all paths for all vertex U, you want to kill all U1, U2 paths. That's it. This is equivalent to odd cycle transversal. So if you hit all these paths in D of G, it will correspond to an odd cycle transversal in G. And if you hit all these odd cycles, it will hit all these paths here. Okay. So in that way, this like hitting these special paths and hitting odd cycles are equivalent. Okay. Any questions? Okay. I think if there is no question, then I think it's a good time to take a break before we move to the next topic about graph distances. Okay. So look, graph distances or shortest path is a very fundamental problem. So suppose if I give you an unweighted graph and given S and T, and we want to find the length of shortest path between S and T. So, and since it's an unweighted graph, a very natural approach is to do BFS starting at S and do this. But as I told in one of my previous, like few times back, like few slides back, is that BFS is really very difficult object to compute. And so there's a paper by, I do not know the name, all of them, but the paper is called Graph Distances in the Data Stream Model. It appeared in CCOM 2008, and which proves that for any constant K, any algorithm that computes the first K layers of BFS tree with probability at least 2 by 3 requires either K by 2 passes. I haven't told you what passes means, but I will explain in a minute, or this much space, right? N to the power 1 plus 1 by K log n to the power 1 by K space. And so what is this multi-pass algorithm? So let's first try to know what multi-pass algorithm, because at least not for numerical value, it is not used that much, but for graph algorithm, it is used quite a lot. So what are multi-pass algorithms? So it's like an edge insertion model. I told you only edges are allowed. So suppose the stream is like E1, E2, somehow EM, okay? Now what happens that you are able to keep some edge. Now this is like first pass. In the second pass, okay, same stream you will see again, E1, E2, EM, okay? So this is like a second pass, right? So think of this way, that how many times you're able to see the same stream, how many number of times you need to see the same stream, okay, corresponds to, what is that called? Will correspond to the number of passes, okay? So generally people study these number of passes when you are able to say that, look, one pass is not enough. Okay, is 2 pass enough? Is 5 pass enough? Right? And people are able to prove lower bounds of all kind, that okay, number of passes and space and all these are related. So, but this is an edge insertion model. Okay, there are people who also study that these edges are coming in, let's say, just 1 second. Let's see if I have permission to mute. Okay. 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 So this, but a lot of people also see that, look, suppose this is a graph, and at the end of this graph, G come. Okay. In the second pass, I will not guarantee you that edges will come in the same way. All I guarantee that at the end of the stream, what you will see is G. Okay. So this is a model which very few people study. Most people study that the streams are coming exactly in the same way. Similarly, in the turnstile model and dynamic model, edges are added, edges are deleted, and so on and so forth. So this consists of stream. And number of passes just means how many times I'm able to, we have an access to this stream, again, going from left to right. Okay. And people have studied, some people have studied that what happens that at the end, all I guarantee the same graph comes. And generally, algorithms are like permutation invariant, they do not depend on the permutation. Okay. So irrespective of what permutation they come, if you're able to guarantee that at the end, the graph remains the same, okay, then we are able to work. But there are very few papers who do these kind of things. Most papers assume that you are able to encounter the passes or encounter the string exactly the way you have seen the first time. It's just that you have access to this stream several number of times, and the number of times you access the stream is what is called passes. Okay, any question about the passes business? Okay. So if that is clear, let's move to. So what we saw here is a lower bound, and what is known, it is a paper from Stacks 2020, who says that in the turnstile model, for each p in 1 to root n, okay, for each p in 1 to root n, it means there exists a randomized algorithm that can compute a BFS tree for any n node connected simple undirected graph with probability this in p passes using O tilde np square spaces. Okay, and there is still a lot of gap between upper and lower bound. So BFS, DFS in streaming has lots and lots of important open questions. Streaming, many important open questions are left. I don't know how hard or non-hard they are, but okay. So basically, if you notice here, if you take root n passes, then how much space this algorithm will take? This algorithm is going to take n square by root n whole square. So n. So basically, this is like order O tilde n polylog in space, but number of passes is like p. Okay. And if you only allow edge insertion model, then even a deterministic algorithm uses, if you notice, O tilde n square root n space, which is like O tilde n 3/2 polylog. So O tilde means you are hiding polylog factors. Okay. So all I wanted to tell you by these two slides are that the area is very rich and it allows all kinds of algorithms. And this is from Stacks 2020. So yeah. Okay. So
Do you remember who are these CFHT guys?
Federer, I do not know the name, but I have. This is why I written the paper name: Streaming Complexity of Spanning Tree Computation. So if you just put this in the stack like this, you will get it. I mean, I can check. I think I should have. Okay. It is Y Zone Chang, Martin Farah Colton, Tizan Sen Feng Zhu, and Meng Zung Zai. So there are two co-authors from Taiwan, one from Rutgers, US, and one from ETH Zurich.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. And if you want, like, and this paper had like some very big people. I mean, yeah, it had Zon Fregmon, Sampath Kannan, Andrew McGregor, Siddharth Suri, and Xian Zhang. Too many names for me to remember. Okay. Okay. So what people do generally, okay, settle for approximation. Okay. And this leads, how do you go about approximating what do you call distances approximating distances? So for that, we lead to this natural idea of what is called spanners. Okay. So what are spanners? So an alpha beta spanner of a graph G is a subgraph H, so that for any nodes U and V, the distance in H is at least distance in G, but at most alpha times distance plus beta, where DG and DH are shortest path distances in G and H respectively. Okay. So when beta equal to 0, then it is called multiplicative spanner, or people also call alpha spanner. And if alpha equal to 1, then it is an additive spanner or plus beta spanner. So I remember that a few years back, so for example, there are two, let me check. A few years back, I think for +2 spanner, there is a n to the power 4 by 3 spanners exist for +2. And there was the best stock paper or best Fox paper in 2016 by Amir Aboud and Bodbin, who showed that this is tight. Okay. So this area is still, like, at least additive spanner area is very, very active. Okay. But today we will only be talking about multiplicative spanners. Okay. So what are we going to do? So notice that if I have H, then H gives you some kind of, so if I had an alpha spanner, then this gives you a factor alpha approximation to shortest path between all pair of vertices, right? So if we can come up with a spanner and compute that spanner quickly in small space, then that will give us a approximation algorithm to shortest path in small space. Okay. So this is why we are interested in spanners. Okay. So what is our algorithm? So I'm going to just apply a greedy algorithm for 2T approximation. So H is empty space. And for each edge U comma V, if the distance between U and V is at least 2T, then you add UV. It means, so I'm constructing my H. Okay. If for an edge, the distance between them is too far in my already constructed edge, then I add this edge, else I ignore this edge. So that's the end of my algorithm. So definitely I can maintain this in, I can do this in streaming, because whenever an edge comes, I check in H whether I can add this or not. Okay. And if this happens, so what is an analysis? Distance increases by at most a factor 2T minus 1. Okay. Why? Because look, you're going to forget an edge if and only if there's a detour of length at most 2T minus 1, right? So it is clear that what we are going to get is a 2T approximation, or in fact 2T minus 1 approximation, right? Because you are going to forget an edge only if there is a path of length at most 2T minus 1 in my already stored spanner. Am I right? So in terms of approximation, there is no issue. But what we will show that H does not have too many edges, since all cycles have length 2T plus 1. And I would like to add here that this bound on number of edges is actually tight using what is called Erdos-Gerth conjecture or something. Okay, which is believed to be true. So if this is the thing, then here's our theorem. We can get 2t minus approximate all distances using these many space. Okay, I should have probably added a tilde, but probably it doesn't matter. Okay, is the algorithm clear? Right? Like, what is not clear is that why it takes this much space. For example, notice if you are interested in, say, if I put t equal to 2, then I'm going to get a factor 3 approximation. And how much space I'm going to take? Order n 1 plus 1 over 2. So n to the power 3 by 2. And as you increase the factor of approximation, okay, amount of space you need in like becomes smaller and smaller. So what happens if I say take t equal to, say, order log n? Then what will I get? I will get order n times n to the power 1 over log n, right? And some other log n's, right? So if I allow to approximate log n by log n, then we actually get n poly log n space algorithm. Okay, so we can we can approximate all pair like this, all distances between all pairs, like order log n approximation in order n poly log n space. Okay, so then it becomes a real streaming algorithm. So as t increases, as your approximation factor becomes worse, space required becomes good. So there is some sort of trade-off here. Okay. So modulo proving this lemma, we are done. Okay. So let's try to prove this lemma. So first of all, let's ask ourselves why all cycles have length at least 2t plus 1. Anybody?
By construction.
Yes, by construction. Okay, or you can say that here are your cycles. Okay, look, by construction, all we are saying is that if there is, we add an edge, if blah happens. Okay, but you're right. So what you can just say that look at any cycle, if it has a length at most 2t, then look at the last edge in the streaming. Okay, uv, right? Why did you add this edge, right? You already had a detour of length 2t minus 1. So you're not going to add this edge uv, right? So as Piotr points out, this is by construction. All cycles have length at least 2t plus 1. So this is good. Okay. Now let's try to do something interesting. Okay, I should have one more space. Okay. So now proof is quite nice, okay, and it is not obvious at least. So let's fix d equal to 2m by n. What is this? This is basically average degree. Okay, and I'm going to construct J is the graph by deleting all vertices of degree, say, less than d by 2 recursively. Right? So what I do, I look at G, if there exists a vertex V such that degree of V is less than equal to d by 2, I delete V. This is what I do. And I recursively do this. Okay? Question number 1. Why is J empty? Sorry, non-empty. Why is J non-empty? Anybody? Okay, no, this is not right.
But if you delete, if you have strict inequality, you do
No,
not
yeah,
get,
we should have strict inequality. You are right. Okay.
average degree.
Yeah, so no, it should be strict inequality. I changed it. Okay, I wrote here. See, but here I made a mistake. Okay, so you do strict inequality. Yes, you delete all vertices of degree strictly less than d by 2.
Then average degree is not increasing. It's decreasing. Sorry.
Exactly. So what Piotr said is that, look, how many such operations we can do? We can do at most n operations, and how many edges am I deleting? At most n into d by 2, right? So this is equal to m. So I'm deleting strictly less than m edges, right? So this implies J is non-empty. Okay, so this is good for us. Now what I'm going, so J is non-empty. Okay, now I'm going to grow, say, let's grow a BFS starting, starting at any vertex in J and stop at depth T. Okay. So what I'm doing is that I pick up some vertex V and I'm drawing BFS and I curtail at depth T. Okay, this is what I'm doing. Okay. Maybe there are we'll worry about, it's possible depth T is empty, right? Okay. We'll deal with that case a little bit later. Okay. So first let's deal with the case when. So what can you say about here? This is depth T. So how many nodes are there here? This is 0th layer, this is first layer, and so when I say depth T, so this is like a, say, T minus 1 layer. No, it's fine. Let's don't make life difficult, unnecessary. 1, 2. No, it's like. Yeah, this is depth T. So this is like we should start from 0, 1, and so on. Okay. So how many nodes are there? Look, first of all, up to depth T, I claim that whatever you have seen here in the ball of this is a forest. So this is tree. Why? Look, I mean, this is not something which I should be saying. Okay, no, this is not tree. This is not correct. Okay, but what is correct is the following. Look at all its children here. Look at all its children. How many children will this guy have here, this vertex V? We know that its degree is at least d by 2 minus 1, right? Now each of these guys has again degree at least d by 2, greater or equal to d by 2. Only one is compensated. So in the second round, I will have number of vertices in the second round will have d by 2 minus 1 to the power sec 2. And look at the t minus 1th level here. This is my t minus 1th level. All its children are here except one here. Why? Because if it had a children in the same level, then I will get a cycle of length. How much? This is a t minus 1th level. So I will get a cycle of length 2t. Yeah, if we had this, then I will get, yeah, right? I will get cycle of length 2t minus 1 plus 1, right? So this is not possible because we had the girth of the graph was at least this. So the number of nodes in the tth level is going to be d by 2 minus 1 to the power t. Okay, that's all that we needed. Okay, so now d by 2 minus 1 to the power t is same as m over n minus 1 to the power t. Okay, and what do you know about this? But this is less than equal to mod j, which is less than equal to n, right? That implies, so if I take the 1 by tth power of this, then I'm going to get m by n minus 1 is less than equal to n to the power 1 over t, right? Which implies m by n is less than equal to n by 1 by t plus 1, which implies m is n plus n to the power 1 over t, 1 plus 1 over t, right? And this is why we get order 1 plus 1 over t. Okay. Okay. So how do we deal if there is no tth level? Okay. If no tth level, what is the meaning of this then? If there is no tth level, then J is a tree because I do not have a cycle, which implies J is a tree, which implies the d by 2, which is equal to m by n. What is an average degree of a tree? Well, 2. So d by 2 is going to be, this is going to be less than equal to 1, which will imply m is less than equal to n, right? So in both cases, we have been able to show that the number of edges or number of vertices is small in this, right? So we have managed to prove that H has at most n to the power 1 plus 1 by 2 edges. And we have crucially used that we do not have short cycles in our graph. Okay? Any question? Okay. And for example, we will see some things in when we will do non-edge insertion model also. But for spanners, there are no single pass this kind of space algorithm which runs in one pass. Okay, so like that is still a good known open problem there. Okay, so this is the proof which is there. I wrote it down, so you can check if I made a mistake. So last topic that I want to cover today is sparsifiers. Okay, so what are sparsifiers? Okay, so an alpha sparsifier of a graph G. Okay, so you have a graph G, and H is a subgraph of G. Even if G is unweighted, H is going to be weighted subgraph. What I mean by this, there will be a function f from E of H to some positive reals, and such that, so H is this. And now what is the capacity of any cut SB minus S? You basically, you look at S and look at V minus S. Okay, you just sum the weights of these edges. Okay, So this is what the definition of capacity. So what it tells that alpha is falsifier of graph G, the weighted subgraph H, such that for any cut, if I look at the value, okay, if I look at the value of that cut in H, okay, then it is at least as much as its value in my graph G, and at most alpha times the value. So it is sandwiched between one, like sandwich, it is at least this, and it is at most alpha times its value in G. Okay, so this is what is called as falsifiers, and there are lots of
a question. So,
yes,
so for the definition. So if so in this definition we require tight lower bound, right? So it's C of H should be always at least C of G.
yes.
Is it reasonable also, for example, to consider falsifiers where it's like 1 over alpha C G?
Yes, Fedor. There's no like yeah, it is. But what happens, Fedor, that you can multiply these things and just put it everything in one side. What I mean by this, so for example, it is conceivable to say, let's say this is 1 minus epsilon, for example, right? Cg of S, and at close say 1 plus epsilon Cg of H, right? Sorry, Cg of S, right? So this also will make sense, for example, right? But now, because these are weighted things, you can divide by 1 minus epsilon all these weights and make sure that this is always greater than or equal to this. So what I mean that whenever you have such kind of things, you can always tweak this function f, okay, and come with some f tilde that it becomes one-sided. But you are right, most people study in this setting only. Do you understand what I said?
I need to digest this. Yes, okay. Yeah, let's move forward. Yeah.
But just as a definition, there is also a definition of this nature. Like lot of places you will see falsifiers being defined as 1 over alpha times alpha.
Okay. Yeah. That's what. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So okay, and so there is a theorem by Batson, Spillman, and Srivastava. There exists a non-streaming algorithm A that constructs a 1 plus epsilon falsifier with only order n epsilon minus 2 edges. So basically, you have an falsifier with these many edges. Okay, this is I don't think this is very hard to prove, but at least in this course, what we will see in one of the coming lecture is this construction. I think log B of, okay, which is also quite nice. Okay, but not today. Okay, today what we are going to use, so we are going to use a streaming algorithm who's going to use this A as a black box to recursively falsify the graph stream. Okay, so I'm going to use this non-streaming algorithm as a black box. Okay, so that's the whole goal of the today's thing. Okay, so first few things. Let H1, H2 be alpha falsifier of G1, G2, same set of vertices and edge disjoint. Then H1 union H2 is also an alpha falsifier of G1 union G2. Look, because these edges are, because this G1, G2 have edge disjoint, they just add up. This is just by definition. So I'm not going to waste my time doing this.
Sorry a second, just so the question again about falsifier.
Yes.
So do you put any constraints on the weights of this falsifier?
No, Fedor, we don't.
But in theory, for example, you can maybe construct some stupid examples when this falsifier has very like exponential weights, for example. So
yes, look, Fedor. So first of all, there are two things. Okay, so if G is weighted.
No, yeah. Sorry a second. Yeah.
Then you could have, so the weights of H will be proportional to the weights. Okay, but if G is unweighted, Fedor. Okay, if G is unweighted, then your weights are going to be roughly like 2, 4, 8, n, like multiples, like powers of 2.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And we will see that. But everybody defines, so if G is weighted, you define your weights in terms of original weight, like, okay, 2 power I times the original weight. Okay, so if that is bad in terms of encoding, then your weight function also will be bad in encoding.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay. So, they basically, this says that if you have two edge disjoint graphs and then you can take the union of their sparsifier, that is also a sparsifier for the original graph. Okay, and this is just followed by definition, so let's not waste our time. But let me show transitivity of this. Okay, what it says that suppose you have J, H, and G. So this is an alpha sparsifier, and this is an alpha sparsifier. J is an alpha sparsifier of H. H is an alpha sparsifier of J. Then this implies J is alpha square sparsifier of G. Okay, so let's try to write down what does this means. Okay, and then the proof follows. H is an alpha sparsifier of G. So what is the meaning of this? For all cut SV minus F, CH of S is less than equal to CG of S, which is less than equal to C alpha times CG of F. Now I can write same thing with respect to J and H, right? So what can I write? I can write CG of S is less than equal to alpha times CH of S, which is less than equal to CH of S. Now I need everything in terms of CG of S. So now what is CG of S is less than equal to alpha times CH of S, which is less than equal to, I use this upper bound on CH of S, which is alpha times CG of S, which is less than equal to alpha square CG of S. Okay. Now for the lower bound, I know that CG of S is greater than equal to CH of S because of this, and I know CH of S is greater than equal to CG of S, right? Okay, so I have shown. Okay, so they are transitive. Okay, so but as many number of times you take, that is going to become worse. Okay, so this is a very beautiful idea of merge and reduce. Okay, so think of this way that you have a stream. So for now, don't think that we have a stream coming. Like let's fix that streams are coming E1, E2, EM. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make boxes, L boxes of size M over T. Okay, where T is the L. So basically, I'm going to have L segments of length T. And what is T? Well, T is going to be something like order N, say gamma minus 2. We'll fix gamma. Okay. Now, what is this order N gamma? Okay. What is it? This is this number. Okay. So every stream is of this length. Okay. And just for our purposes, let's assume that this is equal to some 2 power x power of 2. Okay. So this is like, suppose this is like, what is that called? Okay. This is my graph at the 0th level. Okay. So think of this, that we have made a graph Z0, Z1, G2, GL. Okay. Next, what I will do, think of this way that I have a graph G0 union G1, G2 union G3, dot dot GL minus 1 GL. So there's like a binary tree on them. Okay. And finally, here I will have G. Okay. So I can think of this graph like partially like this, like this, like this, like this. What we will do, look, edges are coming. So the moment this happened, like I have got this amount of information, I will replace G0 by some H0, a sparsifier, right? Some gamma sparsifier. Okay. Similarly, so G0 I have constructed Z0, right? I have constructed Z0. The moment I see that I have got G0, because look, then what happens? I have kept this H0. Now I'm constructing G1. Okay, let G1 come, G1 come, G1 come. The moment G1 here, I go, so I have stored H0 of G0. Now I'm going to get this. The moment G1 will come, I will replace it with H1. Okay. Okay. Then what have I got? And then moment I have H1 has come. Okay. H1. So what do I know? I know that H0 union H1 is a sparsifier of G0 G1 of G0 union G1. This we know. Now I will reduce again. Reduce H0 union H1 to get another sparsifier for G0 G1, which has this property. Okay. So you do all the things in the parallel. So if you notice, so the moment is like, this is what I call merge and reduce. So so think of this way, that at any point of time, I have this H0, I have H1. Okay, fine. The moment I construct H0 and H1, I merge and I keep the merged. I merge them and reduce them to get a smaller sparsifier. Okay. So then I have a sparsifier of G0 union G1. Okay, at this point of time, let's call it H1 prime. And what is the guarantee of this? Oh, well, it has size at most this much, right? So you merged. So H0 union H1 could have a larger size. But when you apply reduction operation, this is like a ref set application. Okay, we get H1 prime. Okay, so at any point of time, if you notice, you will never have, like now you have a G2, like G3. At any point of time, for any level, you will not have more than 2, like except here. At this point of time, you will just output everything, the union, and then reduce it. Here, you will never have more than 2 open things at any level. You get my point? At any level, you will not have more than 2 open things at any point of time, because else you will just take them and merge them, right? The moment I have 2 consecutive things, okay, then I just merge them, right? So at any level of my construction, I will have 2 things of this size. So in total, so this is what you mean by merge and reduce. So I take its union, okay, and then I sparsify it. Then again, I merge 2 things, I sparsify it. So notice that the final, suppose final H, which is a sparsifier of G, has gotten through several layers of sparsifier. But how many layers? As many as the depth of this tree. So the depth will be 1 by gamma times log T H, right? So this will be the quality of sparsifier. Okay. So what is the quality of sparsifier? So I will get H, which is a sparsifier of G of 1 plus gamma log L. Okay. And how much space it takes? So as I told you, the total space it will take is like length of the stream is L, okay, M over T, that's the length of the stream, L segments of length T, okay. So we will have total space which will take is like, total space it is going to take 2T, right, each into log L. This is what total amount of space it is going to take. So it is going to take, so we have got H, which is a sparsifier of length N 1 over gamma square. L is at most log M, right? So into log M. But look, the quality of this sparsifier is only 1 plus gamma times log L. right? But we wanted 1 plus epsilon quality spacifier. Okay, so now it's a time for us to choose gamma accordingly. So what you choose gamma is basically epsilon times log m. Okay, so you choose epsilon times log L. This is what you choose your gamma to be. And at the moment you choose this, you will get, you can show that if you substitute this here, this becomes less than equal to 1 plus epsilon. Okay, this is just a simple maths. Okay, but now how much space did I take? N, and this is 1 over epsilon square log square m into log m, which is order n epsilon square log qm. Okay, so I have got, using a static spacifier, I have been able to get a spacifier in the streaming setting with n poly log m space, and of course there's a dependence on epsilon, which is accuracy, right? So the idea is that you are doing this merge and reduce operation, like, so the moment my size becomes too much of a spacifier, I apply my static spacifier algorithm on that object, reduce it, so on and so forth. So the space requirement is never, and since at any level you only have 2 open object at any point of time, so that implies that at the end, because the moment your 2 siblings are greater than something, you apply the algorithm of what do you call, Batani and all, Spillman, Batani and Srivastava to sparsify that further. Okay, so this is all that you do. So it's written here. So this is all that I wanted to tell you with respect to insertion only stream. And if you have no question, then at least I'm done. So this is just a proof which is written more formally here. Okay, but this is exactly what we did just now. Okay.